Thank you very much, Peter, for your kind introduction and for bringing us all together to talk about and be inspired by and motivated by these topics around sustainability. The specific contribution that I'd like to make is to talk about ESG assessments and the variance that has been reported among them. And I'll just begin by sharing some statistics on the growth of the ESG information and data provision markets. So as interest in ESG considerations of firms has grown, so has the ESG data and information provision markets. We see that there were 160 ESG ratings and data products worldwide in 2020 and more than 600 ratings and rankings globally in 2018. And revenues from ESG information provision are expected to double their 2020 levels by 2025. But notwithstanding this tremendous growth in the ESG information provision markets, one feedback that we see from stakeholders is that they regard the lack of robust ESG data as one of the most significant barriers to greater adoption of ESG strategies. And so what explains that disconnect? I think one answer to that question is the tremendous variance among ESG assessments that has been reported in the literature. This variance has led many to doubt the validity and accuracy of ESG assessments. Let me share briefly a sampling of this literature. The most recent comes from Florian Berg and his co-authors in a 2022 paper where they study 6 ESG providers and 700 underlying indicators, and they report correlations that range in the low end from 38% to 71% at the higher end. They also pinpoint the source of this divergence as emanating from measurement divergence, which refers to different ratings providers measuring the same attribute but using different indicators. We also have a study by Lee and Polychronopoulos that looks at 2 US providers and 2 European providers. They segment their study according to each of the 3 pillars of E, S, and G and find that there's highest correlation on the E pillar, 72%, and then 67% correlation on S and 56% on G. Another paper by Chatterjee and co-authors studies 6 ESG providers. They report an average overlap among these providers' assessments ranging from 19% to 60%. Lastly, I'll share with you a study by Danes, Gao, and Larker that looks at just the G rankings, the governance rankings of 4 ESG providers, and they conclude that these ratings do not accurately predict governance-related outcomes with precision or strength. This is just a sampling of the vast literature that is reporting and critiquing the variance and divergence that is observed among ESG assessments. And the consensus and tone that emerges from this literature is that variance is a problem that is in need of an urgent solution. In the paper that I just recently published in the Missouri Law Review, I take a slightly different perspective and highlight the duality of convergence. I emphasize that convergence or divergence among assessments is neither categorically harmful nor categorically desirable. That is to say, there are certainly some harmful forms of divergence. We should police divergence if it is a divergence or phenomenon that arises from inconsistencies due to prejudice or bias. We see some evidence of this. Tang and co-authors find that sister firms of ESG assessors tend to receive higher ratings. Florian Berg has written about what he calls the halo effect, where firms that are rated well on one dimension tend to enjoy that glow of their superior performance, and that translates to higher performance on other dimensions as well. There's also a study that shows that there is a bias toward larger public and American firms. And these types of biases or prejudices should definitely be taken seriously. And we will talk at the end about how we might ensure that these types of inconsistencies can be policed more accurately. We also worry about manufactured complexity, complexity that may be artificially created by rated subjects so as to generate a range of ratings from which they can cherry pick or ratings shop. On the other hand, I want to highlight that convergence is not necessarily an indicator of accuracy. Convergence may be the product of inflation, and this inflation may emanate from conflicts of interest, groupthink, laxity, or lack of competition. These descriptors might remind us of the credit ratings agencies in the 2007-2009 period, which were blamed for catalyzing one of the most devastating financial crises in recent history. These ratings agencies displayed a tremendous amount of convergence. They showed 99% convergence on their ratings of collateralized debt obligations, but it was later revealed that these assessments and their convergence was a product of inflation. And so I think it's important to then distinguish between the context where we should expect to see convergence and context where we should expect to see divergence. Here I'm going to draw primarily from Chatterjee and co-authors' work, where they draw again from the broad literature on ratings more generally to find that there are two preconditions to convergence among assessments. One is theorization, which requires a clear agreement on what is being assessed and why that matters. And second is commensurability, which refers to the extent to which different assessors measure the same construct similarly. So that is to say, we should expect to see convergence in contexts where there is strong theorization and strong commensurability, but we should actually expect to observe divergence in contexts where there is weak theorization and low levels of commensurability. And applying this framework to the ESG context, the premise of ESG is that we need to move away from our singular understanding of firm value that is centered around shareholder returns and devise alternative measures of corporate value, looking at things like the environment, society, and governance mechanisms. So in that sense, the very identity of ESG relies on there being an absence of agreement on what it means for a firm to be a strong performer. And there is going to be some diversity on the extent to which different assessors measure different or same constructs. And so, especially in these early years of experimentation and innovation, I think we should expect that there is weak theorization, that there is low commensurability. And as a result, divergence among assessments is a natural byproduct of the shape and nature of this moment of where the ESG market is situated in its development. So this presumption that we see in the literature that there is this singular, accurate ESG value around which all assessors should converge is actually contrary and even counterproductive to the very nature of ESG, which rests on and is driven by the ethos of value plurality. And so in this context, perhaps intra-assessor consistency, so having consistency within a single assessor, is a better and more reliable measure of integrity than just looking at inter-assessor consistency, meaning consistency and convergence across different assessors. So how might we ensure intra-assessor consistency? And this is going back to that earlier slide about how do we foster healthy forms of variance and how do we mitigate more harmful forms of variance. All of that really stems from and is rooted in disclosure. It's about the disclosure of methodologies on the part of the assessors, including any changes, disclosure of all ratings received on the part of the rated subjects, including what assessments they've received from the same assessor across different time periods, and then disclosure on both parties about pricing policies and the management of conflicts of interest. In the arena of disclosure in this space, I think the 2021 International Organization of Securities Commissions report offers a very detailed and helpful framework for where we might begin the design of such disclosure frameworks. And for more information about this duality and how we should celebrate and manage this duality, I invite you all to read my recent paper, which is available on SSRN and also on the Missouri Law Review website and in print as well. I thank you very much for your time and attention.